Hannah had always grown up in a small town where everyone knew everyone. Her family lived in an old house at the end of a dusty road, surrounded by fields that once belonged to her grandfather. Life was simple but never easy. Her father worked hard every day, fixing tools, helping neighbors, and doing whatever jobs he could find to support his family. Her mother had passed away when Hannah was still young, so most responsibilities at home fell on her. She learned to cook, clean, take care of animals, and help her father in every way she could. Even though life was tough, Hannah carried a quiet strength inside her. People admired her for her kindness and honesty. But behind her smile, she carried a heavy worry. Her father had been sick for months, and his health was becoming worse. The medicine cost more than they could afford, and the small jobs he got were not enough to pay the bills. Hannah worked part-time at a bakery in town, but her earnings barely covered food. One morning, Hannah's father collapsed while trying to repair an old tractor. She rushed to help him, her hands shaking as she tried to steady him. They managed to get him inside, but he could hardly speak. His breathing was weak, and his chest felt tight. Hannah knew they needed more medicines and a checkup, but she also knew they owed money to Mr. Collins, the local supplier who provided them with groceries and household items on credit. Mr. Collins had been patient for months, but recently he had started to lose his patience. He had warned her father that if the money wasn't paid soon, he would stop giving them items on credit. Hannah tried everything she could, even asking some neighbors if they had extra work for her, but nothing was enough. She felt trapped between her father's illness and the growing debt. That afternoon, as Hannah walked toward the town to speak with Mr. Collins again, she noticed people whispering. It wasn't unusual. In a small town, news traveled fast. Still, she kept her head down and walked straight into the store. Mr. Collins stood behind the counter, counting money. He looked up and sighed when he saw her. "Hannah, I can't keep waiting," he said firmly. "I'm sorry about your father, but business is business." Hannah swallowed, trying to stay calm. "Please, just a few more days. I will find a way." Mr. Collins shook his head. "I already gave you months. I can't give more." She felt her stomach twist with fear. Her father needed medicine tonight, not next week. She tried again, her voice softer, almost pleading. "If you stop giving us credit, we won't have anything to eat. Please, Mr. Collins, I'm trying." Before he could respond, the bell above the shop door rang. A tall man stepped inside. His boots were dusty, his shirt worn from long hours of work, and his hat shaded his calm, serious face. Everyone in town knew him. Lucas Reed, a rancher who lived miles outside the town. He rarely spoke unless needed, but he had a reputation for being loyal and honest. People said he worked from sunrise to sunset, taking care of his land, animals, and workers. Lucas nodded politely at Hannah before walking to the counter. "Collins," he said in his usual quiet tone. "I came to pick up the supplies I ordered." Mr. Collins immediately changed his attitude. "Of course, Mr. Reed. They're ready." Hannah stepped aside, hoping Lucas wouldn't notice the stress on her face. But Lucas had always been observant. His eyes moved from Mr. Collins to Hannah, sensing something was wrong. "Everything all right?" he asked softly. Hannah forced a small smile. "Yes. Just a small issue." Mr. Collins, however, spoke before she could say anything else. "Not really a small issue. Her family owes money. I can't keep giving them goods unless they pay." The words felt like a sharp sting. Hannah looked down, embarrassed. She didn't want anyone, especially Lucas, to hear about their problems. She wished she could disappear at that moment. Lucas didn't react immediately. He simply watched Hannah for a moment, sensing her pain and worry. Then he quietly asked, "How much?" Mr. Collins quickly grabbed a ledger. $420. To Hannah, it felt like a mountain she could never climb. But Lucas didn't look shocked. He simply reached for his wallet, took out the money, and placed it on the counter. "Here," he said. "This settles their dues." Hannah's eyes widened in shock. "No. No. Lucas. You can't do this." "I didn't ask for help. I know," he replied gently. "But you need it." She shook her head, her voice trembling. "Why would you pay for me?" "I can't promise I'll return this soon." Lucas stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "It's not about the money, Hannah. Years ago, I made a promise to your father. He once helped me when I had nothing. He asked me to look out for you if you ever needed help." Hannah stared at him, confused. Her father never mentioned this. Lucas continued. "You were just a little girl then. I don't expect you to remember." Mr. Collins interrupted. "So the debt is paid. They're clear." Lucas nodded, then turned back to Hannah. "Let me walk you home." Hannah didn't want to cause more trouble, but she also didn't know how to refuse. They walked side by side down the quiet road. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky orange and pink. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, it felt calm, almost comforting. After a while, Hannah finally spoke. "You paid for me, so keep your promise," she said softly. She didn't mean it in a demanding way. It was more of a confused statement, a mix of gratitude, guilt, and fear. Lucas stopped walking. His eyes met hers. "I intend to," he said gently. "But don't think of it as something you owe me. I did this because I care, and because your father trusted me." Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. She didn't want to cry in front of him. "I don't understand why you'd help someone like me." Lucas shook his head. "You're stronger than you think, and you don't have to face everything alone." When they reached her house, Lucas checked on her father, helped him sit up, and made sure he had water. By the time Lucas was leaving, the old man's eyes softened, as if he recognized something he had been waiting to see for years. "Lucas," he said in a weak voice, "I knew you'd come." Lucas nodded respectfully. "A promise is a promise." After he left, Hannah sat beside her father, her mind full of questions and emotions she had never felt before. Relief washed over her, but so did a strange warmth she couldn't explain. She thought about Lucas's calm face, his steady voice, the way he didn't hesitate to help. She had always known Lucas from afar. People in town respected him, but she never imagined he had a connection to her family. Now the truth made everything feel different. That night, as she lay in bed, Hannah could not sleep. She kept repeating his words in her mind. "You don't have to face everything alone." For the first time in a long while, she felt hope. Hope that things might change. Hope that her father might recover. And hope that maybe someone out there truly cared. She didn't know what the future held. But one thing was clear. Lucas Reed had stepped into her life at the exact moment she needed someone. And that simple act of kindness was about to change everything. Hannah woke up early the next morning, long before the sun began to rise. The air was cold, and the quiet of dawn wrapped around the small house like a blanket. She sat on the edge of her bed and stared at the floor, still thinking about Lucas and everything that had happened the previous day. She still couldn't believe he had paid their debt. It felt unreal, like a dream she wasn't sure she deserved. Her father was still sleeping, breathing softly. His face looked tired but peaceful. Lucas's help had taken a huge burden off her shoulders, but she didn't want to depend on anyone. She didn't like feeling weak or helpless. She wanted to repay him somehow, even if he said she didn't have to. When she walked outside to get fresh air, she noticed the sky turning light blue. The quiet morning gave her time to think, and she realized she had to do something to earn her dignity back. She didn't want Lucas to feel he had simply rescued her. She wanted to give something in return. Later that day, she gathered her courage and walked to Lucas's ranch. The walk was long, dusty, and filled with her racing thoughts. She rehearsed what she would say over and over in her mind. But when the ranch came into view, her heart beat faster in her chest. She had never been there before, only heard stories. Some said it was beautiful. Some said Lucas worked harder than anyone in town to keep it running. When she finally reached the gate, she paused, taking in the sight before her. The ranch stretched far across the land, wide green fields, wooden fences, stables, and a large farmhouse standing proudly in the distance. Horses grazed quietly, their tails swaying in the breeze. She could hear the soft sounds of animals and the voices of workers beginning their day. She took a deep breath and walked toward the house. Before she reached the steps, Lucas came out of the barn, wiping his hands with a cloth. He stopped when he saw her and looked surprised, but not unkind. "Hannah?" he said, stepping closer. "Everything okay at home?" She nodded. "Yes. My father is resting." I came to talk." Lucas sensed her nervousness. "Come inside," he said gently, but Hannah shook her head. "No. I don't want to trouble you. I just wanted to tell you. I want to work here. I want to repay you. Even if it takes months." Lucas didn't speak at first. He studied her carefully, then took a deep breath. "Hannah, I didn't help you because I wanted anything back. I know," she said softly. "But I need to do this. For myself." Her voice was clear, firm, and Lucas respected that. He nodded slowly. "All right. If working makes you feel better, then you can stay. But this is not about debt. You work because you want to, not because you owe me." Hannah felt a strange relief, mixed with gratitude. Lucas called one of his workers, an older man named Thomas, and asked him to show her around. Thomas was kind and friendly, and he explained everything with patience. He introduced her to the horses, the feeding area, the barn, and the small office where records were kept. At first, Hannah felt lost. Ranch work was nothing like what she was used to. She didn't know how to handle horses properly, didn't know how to clean stalls, didn't know how to lift heavy buckets without hurting her back. But she tried. She put all her effort into learning, watching carefully how others worked. Lucas noticed her from a distance. Every now and then, he stopped to make sure she was doing okay. Sometimes he corrected her gently. Sometimes he simply smiled when she tried something new. He admired that she didn't give up easily, even when her hands turned red from the rope or when her arms ached from carrying hay. Days turned into weeks, and Hannah became a part of the ranch. She didn't stand out. She blended in, working alongside the other workers. She listened more than she spoke, but slowly, she began to open up. She learned how to enjoy the morning breeze, how peaceful the ranch felt before sunrise, and how satisfying it was to see a day's work completed. Lucas and Hannah often crossed paths. Sometimes he would help her lift something heavy. Sometimes he would show her how to do a task more easily. Other times they would stand near the fence and exchange a few quiet words. Their conversations were simple about the weather, the animals, her father's health. But something gentle flowed between them. Something unspoken yet warm. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Lucas leaned against the fence while Hannah finished feeding the horses. The sky was painted with gold and pink, and the soft light made everything look peaceful. "You're learning fast," Lucas said. Hannah smiled shyly. "I'm trying. You don't have to push yourself so hard," he replied. "We can handle things here." But I want to," she said softly. "Working here. It feels good. It helps me forget my worries for a while." "Chase the worries." Lucas nodded, understanding more than he showed. "Then stay as long as you need." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It felt comfortable, like they both understood each other without needing many words. Meanwhile, the people in town began to notice Hannah going to the ranch every day. Some whispered, some smiled knowingly, and some were simply curious. But Hannah paid no attention. She worked because it helped her, not because she wanted attention. As days passed, she began to see a different side of Lucas. He wasn't just a quiet rancher. He was a man who cared deeply for others. A man who worked hard because he valued honesty and effort. He helped his workers without hesitation, listened to their problems, and treated them with respect. He treated her the same way. Not like someone he rescued, but like someone capable and strong. One afternoon, while carrying a basket of feed, Hannah slipped on wet ground and almost fell. Lucas appeared so fast she didn't even see him coming. He grabbed her arm, steadying her before she hit the ground. "You okay?" he asked, concern clear in his eyes. Hannah nodded, embarrassed but grateful. "Yes. Thank you." He didn't let go immediately, just long enough to make sure she was steady. Their eyes met for a moment, just a second. But it made Hannah's heart flutter in a way she couldn't explain. She quickly looked away, her cheeks warming. Lucas stepped back, giving her space. But his expression changed slightly, as if something inside him had shifted. He didn't say anything else, but Hannah felt it. Something gentle was growing between them, even if neither of them understood it yet. As the weeks went by, Hannah grew more comfortable at the ranch. She laughed more often, especially with the workers who treated her like family. She learned how to care for horses and even how to guide them gently. Her hands grew stronger, her confidence brighter. One night, a sudden storm hit the ranch. Strong winds shook the trees, and lightning flashed across the sky. Hannah, who was helping secure the barn doors, felt her heart race with fear. She had always hated storms. The loud thunder reminded her of nights when she was alone as a child, scared and powerless. Lucas noticed her trembling and walked toward her. "Come inside," he said gently. "You don't have to stay out in this." She nodded and followed him into the ranch house. The warmth inside made her relax a little. Lucas handed her a cup of warm tea and sat nearby. "You don't like storms?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "No. My mother died during a storm. I always feel uneasy." Lucas didn't pry. He simply nodded with understanding, giving her a safe space to breathe. They sat in quiet companionship, listening to the rain against the windows. For the first time, Hannah felt truly protected. When the storm eased, she whispered, "You kept your promise, Lucas. But you also changed my life." Lucas looked at her, his eyes soft. "Maybe we both changed something, too." At that moment, something deeper began between them. Not spoken, not rushed, but gently forming, like a small seed beginning to grow. Hannah didn't know where it would lead. She only knew that with every day she spent at the ranch, with every moment she shared with Lucas, her life was slowly transforming in ways she never expected. Days at the ranch continued peacefully, but Hannah's heart often felt divided. When she was at the ranch, she felt strong, hopeful, and safe. But when she returned home each evening, the sight of her father struggling in bed reminded her that life could change in a moment. His health was becoming worse. Some days he could sit up and talk to her, but many days he could barely open his eyes. Hannah stayed awake many nights, listening to his breathing, fearing it might stop if she looked away even for a second. Lucas noticed the tiredness on her face. He noticed her quietness too, how her smile had become smaller, how her eyes often stared into the distance, as if fighting back emotions she could not express. He never questioned her directly, because he understood that some pains were too deep to explain. Instead, he simply stood by her, helping in small ways. He would send fresh vegetables home with her, arrange medicine from town, or offer to drive her home if she looked too exhausted to walk. One afternoon, Hannah rushed to the ranch earlier than usual. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and her hands trembled as she held onto her shawl. Lucas, who was repairing a fence nearby, immediately noticed something was wrong. He dropped his tools and walked toward her. "Hannah?" he asked softly. "What happened?" She tried to speak, but tears filled her eyes, and her voice broke. Lucas didn't ask anything more. He simply walked her to the porch, sat with her, and waited patiently. After a long moment, she whispered, "My father. He's worse. He couldn't breathe this morning. I don't know what to do." Lucas placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Let me take him to the hospital," he said. "You don't have to face this alone." She nodded, unable to speak. Together they went to her house, and Lucas carefully helped her father into his truck. The old man looked weak, but when he saw Lucas, he tried to smile. "You again," he whispered. Still keeping that promise. Lucas smiled softly. Always. At the hospital, Hannah sat beside her father while Lucas helped handle paperwork. The doctor examined him and explained that his condition had become serious. He needed stronger medication and complete rest. Hannah listened with a heavy heart, holding her father's hand tightly. Lucas stayed outside the room, but close enough that she could see him through the small window in the door. After some time, her father asked to speak to him alone. Lucas stepped inside quietly. The old man looked at him with tired but clear eyes. "Lucas," he said, "I don't have many days left. I can feel it." Hannah, standing near the bed, shook her head with tears. "Don't say that, Papa." He gently squeezed her hand. "Hannah, my sweet child, I want to speak to Lucas." She wiped her eyes and stepped aside. Her father looked at Lucas with a deep, knowing expression. "I asked you years ago to look after her. You've done that. But now—" He paused and took a weak breath. "Now she needs someone who will care for her when I can't." Lucas swallowed hard. "I will be here for her. You have my word." The old man nodded with relief. "I knew you would be. You've always been honest. And she trusts you." When the doctor returned, they both stepped outside to give him space. Hannah sat on a bench in the hallway, staring at the wall as if trying to force back every emotion inside her. Lucas sat beside her but didn't speak. He simply held her hand, giving her strength through silence. The next days were some of the hardest of her life. Lucas drove her to the hospital every morning and stayed with her until late evening. He brought food she barely touched, and water she forgot to drink. He didn't leave her side. Even when she broke down and cried silently, he sat beside her, not judging, not asking questions, just being there. One evening, as she leaned against him, exhausted from worry, she whispered, "I don't know what I would do without you." Lucas looked at her with gentle eyes. "You don't have to find out." Her father remained in the hospital for several days, but his condition did not improve. It worsened. His voice became weaker, his breaths shorter. Hannah stayed beside him, holding his hand through every moment. One night, he asked for her to come closer. "Hannah," he whispered, "I need to tell you something." She leaned in, tears already forming. "You must not be afraid of life," he said. "And don't try to carry everything alone." She nodded, sobbing openly. "I'm scared. Papa, I'm scared to lose you." He touched her cheek gently. "My time is near. But your life is still waiting for you." He looked toward the door, where Lucas stood quietly, watching them. "And Lucas, he is a good man. I trust him. I always did." Hannah's heart trembled. She looked at Lucas, then back at her father. "Are you saying?" Her father smiled faintly. "I am saying that some promises are made for a reason." Those were among the last clear words her father spoke. By the next morning, his breathing had become shallow. Hannah held his hand tightly, crying softly. Lucas stood beside her, one hand resting on her shoulder, grounding her, steadying her, as her world slowly began to crumble. When her father took his last breath, a quiet stillness filled the room. Hannah let out a soft cry and leaned into Lucas, who wrapped a steady arm around her. He didn't speak, because nothing he said could erase her pain, but his presence kept her from falling apart completely. The next few days passed in a blur. The funeral, the visitors, the condolences, all of it felt unreal to Hannah. She tried to stay strong, but every night she cried until sleep took over. Lucas checked on her every day, making sure she ate, making sure she slept. He stayed close without ever forcing his presence on her. But grief has a way of confusing the heart. After the funeral, Hannah overheard two women in town talking. They whispered words that sank deep into her mind. Lucas only helped her because of that old promise to her father. It's pity, not love. She should repay him and move on. The words hit her like a cold wind. Everything inside her twisted in confusion. She knew Lucas cared. But what if he stayed near her only because he felt obligated? What if she was nothing more than a duty, a promise he felt forced to keep? The doubts grew inside her heart like dark shadows. That evening, when she returned to the ranch to work, she avoided Lucas's eyes. She worked quickly, silently, keeping distance even though he tried to check on her. When he asked if she was okay, she simply said, "I'm fine," without meeting his gaze. Lucas knew something had changed, but he didn't know why. After finishing her tasks, Hannah gathered her things and walked toward the gate. Lucas caught up to her, placing a gentle hand on her arm. "Hannah," he said softly, "why are you avoiding me?" She took a breath, her heart aching. "Lucas, I think I should stop working here." He froze. "Why?" "Because I've repaid enough," she said quietly. "You helped my father, and you helped me. But I don't want to be someone's responsibility." Lucas's expression changed. Hurt flickered in his eyes, but his voice stayed calm. "Is that what you think you are to me?" "It's what people are saying," she whispered. He stepped closer, his voice steady and honest. "Hannah, I helped your father because I respected him, and I helped you because I cared, but I didn't stay by your side because of a promise." She looked up, eyes filled with tears. "Then why did you stay?" Lucas took a slow breath. "Because I love you." Her heart stopped for a moment. The world around her went silent. Lucas continued, his voice low and full of truth. "I tried to stay away. I tried to keep my distance. But every day you came here, you changed something in me. You were never a duty. You were never a burden. You are someone I care for deeply." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I thought you kept your promise, not that you cared for me." Lucas gently wiped her tear with his thumb. "I kept the promise. But I stayed because I care. Because I want you in my life. Not because I owe it to anyone." Hannah felt her walls slowly breaking. Her confusion, her hurt, her doubts all began to fade as she looked into his sincere, steady eyes. In that quiet moment, something inside her heart softened. She finally whispered, "I didn't want to leave. I was just afraid." Lucas spoke gently, "Then stay. Not because of a promise, but because you want to." And for the first time since her father passed away, Hannah felt a small light returning inside her heart. A light she thought she had lost forever. The days that followed moved gently, as if the wind over the ranch knew that something important had finally settled in Mason's and Lily's lives. Their hearts felt lighter, yet both knew that the end of the journey was not marriage itself but the life that starts after it. The morning after the wedding, Lily woke up with a warm feeling of comfort. The sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, and she could hear the quiet sounds of the ranch, the soft neigh of horses, the distant calling of workers, and the gentle creaking of wood warming under the sun. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she had to run or hide. She felt safe. Mason had already woken up. When Lily stepped outside, she found him feeding the horses. His hat tipped slightly, the early sun painting his figure in soft gold. He looked peaceful, more peaceful than she had ever seen him. When he noticed her walking toward him, he smiled, and that simple smile held the warmth she never received from anyone else in her past life. She walked closer, and Mason handed her a small piece of hay, guiding her hand to feed the horse. It was the first small lesson of ranch life he gave her as a wife. It was nothing dramatic, nothing grand, but it felt meaningful in a way words couldn't fully explain. The ranch workers congratulated them one by one throughout the day. Many of them had known Mason for years. He wasn't a loud or dramatic man, but he was respected. They welcomed Lily gently, understanding that she came from a life far removed from ranches and open skies. One of the older workers told Mason quietly, but with a smile, that Lily brought a softness the place had needed for a long time. Mason didn't say much, yet his eyes softened every time he looked at her. Lily took her time learning the routines of ranch life. She helped with small tasks, washing vegetables, preparing coffee for the workers early in the morning, and sometimes simply sitting with Mason while he checked paperwork or planned upcoming work. She wasn't forced to work. Mason never once asked her to do anything. but she did things because she wanted to be a part of his world. Slowly, she felt herself becoming rooted, like the land had finally accepted her presence. There were moments of nervousness too. Lily still had small pieces of fear from her past, the fear of disappointing someone, the fear of being unwanted, the fear of making mistakes. Whenever she became too quiet or looked uncertain, Mason noticed. He always reassured her in his calm way, not with long speeches but with simple gestures. Sometimes he would place a hand on her shoulder, sometimes he would sit beside her, and sometimes he would just say, "It's all right, take your time." It was in these tiny moments that Lily realized how different he was from every person she had known before. One evening, the two of them sat on the porch, watching the sky turn soft shades of orange and pink. The air smelled sweet from the nearby fields. Lily leaned back in her chair and sighed. Mason looked at her with gentle curiosity. "What are you thinking?" he asked. She hesitated for a moment, unsure how to express the mix of emotions in her heart. "I never thought I'd end up here," she finally said. Mason studied her quietly, then said, "Sometimes life surprises us. Sometimes it brings us where we're meant to be, even if we don't understand the road that leads there." His words rested with her like a warm blanket. She thought about how she had once felt like she didn't belong anywhere, how her life had felt like a series of mistakes and disappointments. Yet here she was standing on land that felt like home, beside a man who never asked for anything but gave everything through his actions. In the following weeks, Lily began to make small improvements around the ranch house. She planted flowers near the front steps, filled the shelves with books she wanted to read, and added little touches to the kitchen to make it feel livelier. Mason noticed everything, even though he didn't always comment. But Lily could tell by the quiet smile he wore whenever he walked through the house that he appreciated her presence in ways he didn't always say out loud. One morning, a sudden storm hit the ranch. The wind blew fiercely, and rain poured as if the sky itself had burst open. Mason and the workers rushed outside to secure the animals, while Lily watched from the doorway, worried. After a few minutes, Mason returned, soaked from head to toe. Lily ran toward him with a towel and helped him dry off. Her hands moved quickly, but her eyes showed worry. "You should have waited until the rain slowed," she said softly. Mason smiled, shaking some water from his hair. "The animals needed care first," he replied simply. Lily hesitated, then admitted, "I get scared when things feel out of control." In that moment, Mason placed a gentle hand under her chin, lifting her gaze toward him. "You're safe here," he said calmly. "Nothing's going to take you away from this home." His voice was steady, and she believed him not because he forced her to believe, but because every action he had taken since the day he paid for her safety proved he meant every word he spoke. The storm passed later that evening, and the ranch glistened under the fresh, clean air. Lily and Mason walked together after the rain, the soft mud sticking lightly to their boots. Streams of water glimmered in the fading light. Lily found herself reaching for Mason's hand without thinking. He didn't react dramatically. He just held her hand with a natural ease, as if it was something they had been doing for years. Their bond grew in moments like these, quiet moments, simple moments, moments filled with trust instead of fear. Lily realized she wasn't trying to be perfect around Mason. She could make mistakes, be uncertain, and still feel accepted. As months passed, Lily became more confident. She learned how to ride a horse under Mason's careful guidance. She cooked meals that made workers smile. She even helped Mason with paperwork sometimes, though she often laughed at how confusing she found ranch numbers. Mason would shake his head with a small grin, telling her she was improving even if she didn't believe it. There was one moment that stayed deeply in Lily's heart. Mason had come home late after solving a problem with one of the ranch suppliers. He looked exhausted. Lily quietly prepared warm food for him and placed it on the table. Mason sat down heavily, rubbing his forehead. "You didn't have to wait for me," he said gently. Lily answered, "I wanted to." He paused, looking at her for a long moment. Then he said something that felt simple, but carried deep meaning. "I'm glad you're here." The words settled into her heart like seeds that had been waiting for the right soil. One evening, near the end of summer, The two of them sat by the fence watching the stars. Lily leaned against Mason's shoulder. The sky was wide and peaceful, sprinkled with countless shining points. She felt the calm of the night wrap around them like a soft blanket. She spoke quietly. "Do you ever regret anything? About what you had to do? About me?" Mason shook his head slowly. "No," he replied. "I don't regret anything. I did what I believed was right. And I'm glad it brought you into my life." Lily's eyes softened, and she whispered, "I'm glad too." In that moment, she finally understood that she hadn't been saved out of obligation. She had been given a chance to live a life she didn't even know she could ask for. And she, in return, brought warmth to a man who had spent years living with duty and solitude. Their story was not built on dramatic miracles or sudden changes. It grew like the ranch's fields, slowly, gently, with patience and care. And as they sat together under the open sky, Lily felt something she had never felt before. She felt home. They didn't know what challenges the future might bring, but they knew one thing for certain. They would face everything together, side by side, bound not by promises made under pressure, but by the steady bond they built with trust, kindness, and quiet love. Their life was simple, but it was real, and it was theirs.